Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Note Investor Podcast. I'm your host, Dan Deppen. And in today's episode, I'm going to have a replay of a webinar that I did recently on how to become a note investor in 30 days. So this webinar was part of the launch of the new Note Launchpad course. And so in the webinar, I'll talk about kind of the path that I took in notes and little more of the backstory on how I learned notes, got into the business, and then the 5 phases that I've come up with for becoming a note investor. So there are a few things I reference in the webinar that like a bonus that was available right after the webinar that you might not be able to take advantage of, but I think there's a lot of good information in there. And then also, depending on when you're listening to this, since this is the podcast, you might even be listening to this like a year later. With the Note Launchpad, the way that's going to work, it's going to be available at different windows in time. So if you're listening to this and you're interested and it's not available, just drop me an email at dan@fusionnotes.com and I will help you out. So in the meantime, hope you enjoy the replay of the webinar.
Welcome to the Note Investor Podcast. We'll guide you through the ups and downs of note investing and teach you all about the nitty-gritty details of the business that other people won't talk about. Your host, Dan Deppen, is a former aerospace engineer and product manager who transitioned away from cubicle life to full-time note investing in 2018. Our website is www.fusionnotes.com, where you can subscribe to this podcast, comment, and find links to other information on note investing.
All right, there we go. So now I'm ready. So anyways, welcome for joining everyone. So tonight I'm going to be talking about how you can become a note investor in 30 days. So I haven't done a webinar in a while, so it's a little bit overdue, but some things I wanted to talk about and some new materials I have coming available that I wanted to share. But if you're not that familiar with me, I want to give kind of an introduction. So I'm a full-time note investor, and I also teach real estate investors how they can become not just note investors, but active note investors as well. So there are a couple of different online courses I've put together over the last few years, one on due diligence I'm kind of known for, one on pricing, and tonight I'm going to talk about some stuff that's a lot more in depth. So some background on me, I started my career as a mechanical engineer in the aerospace industry, building satellite antennas and mechanisms and some other things. And then got kind of tired of government contracting, went and got my MBA at the University of Colorado, and then became a product manager. But I've really been an active investor since I was about 19 years old. Started in stocks, moved into options, and then eventually real estate, and then distressed mortgage notes as well. So I've got two amazing girls who are running around here who may make noise in the background later, but that's okay. And today I've got a pretty decent size multi-million-dollar note portfolio that I operate. And I was attracted, I think, initially to notes because it's a niche that, has a few more nuances maybe than some other areas. But if you can get it figured out, you can really find some cool opportunities. And in my opinion, I've always been surprised why this niche has not kind of blown up and become larger. So I enjoy sharing information with other investors so they can partake in it as well. And I kind of do that through my podcast, the Note Investor podcast, my newsletter, and things like this webinar tonight. But first we'll do a little bit of sorting to kind of make sure you're in the right place. So this is for you if you are interested, obviously, in investing in mortgage notes, but more specifically, I know a lot of people sometimes have, maybe read a book on notes, or they listen to some podcasts like mine or Chris Savini's, when they're interested, but they're having trouble actually getting started, right? So like books and podcasts and some other things have a lot of good information, but they're not necessarily, it can be challenging to take all of that information and then put it together in a way that's more actionable. Other people have kind of fallen down the YouTube rabbit hole, or active on Facebook groups and learning, and maybe you've also done some training before, maybe some expensive training, but a lot of times when people have done this, they're still kind of coming away sort of overwhelmed by how to put everything together. So, or maybe you've bought some notes, right? So maybe you've already gotten in the game, but you're not really sure how to scale, right? So one of the things you'll find in notes is you can do, a couple, two, three, four, maybe five, and sort of keep things in your head, but you start talking about 10, 20, 30, 50, 100 notes, you really need some systems in place for your business. And it's something that I try to talk about as much as I can because it's really the key. Having the right systems and processes is the key to scale. And it's something that you just don't really hear discussed. Like even a lot of the other educational materials, a lot of it's just centered around kind of the basics of notes a lot of times. And so what happens is a lot of times people end up spending lots of time, sometimes months, sometimes years, and don't actually close on a note deal. So if you're interested in learning how to get there, even from zero to being able to buy notes in 30 days, and yes, this is possible. There are probably some old crusty people that will scoff and say you need, years and years and years of experience before you can do that. But I really don't think that's true if you know what to do and you have a step-by-step system to get there. So I'm watching a number of participants grow, and I'm really hoping we don't go over 100 because my account can't take over 100. So if that happens, I may need to re-record this. At the same time, right, this may not be for you if you're kind of looking for somebody to tell you that no investing is just all like magical happiness and rainbows and unicorns, and it's like really easy. You just get rich quick with this one weird trick or something like that. That's not what this is, and I'm the first to tell you that. And I've talked about this a lot on my podcast and other places, but it's no investing is challenging. It has its share of ups and downs. It's very lucrative and it's very worthwhile, in my opinion. But I don't even pretend to suggest that it's like easy necessarily. It's also not for you, if you're one of the people that just likes to kind of, maybe you're interested in the space and you enjoy taking information in on it. Like there are a lot of people that do this, and there's nothing wrong with it. Where maybe they're interested in note investing or other forms of investing in multifamily, and they'll kind of like take training and watch videos and gather information, but don't actually have the intention of going out and using it to do deals. So, some of the stuff I'm going to share and talk about is really for people who are interested in getting in the game and doing something concrete. It's also not for you if you're the kind of person who enjoys paying for overpriced training. There are actually people out here like this. I'm not just kidding around. I talked to someone several months ago who was actually bragging that they had spent almost $100,000 on various real estate training programs. That's not really good unless you're going to apply that and get a return. And there's also a lot of that, even overpriced training. Some of it I've taken in myself, some of it I haven't. But some of them in particular, what I've heard from people is that, they'll sign up for some training, whether it's a seminar, some kind of school, and they think they're going to learn everything you need to know about notes. And then they kind of like get presented enough information to get them excited and kind of wet their whistle, and then go, oh, hey, if you want the real information, well, you can buy this other thing that's even more phenomenally expensive. And I liken it to like Charlie Brown trying to kick the football. So the stuff that I'm presenting here is just kind of all inclusive, right? There's no, I'm going to talk about the note Launchpad and some other things coming up, but that's all there is. It contains everything. There's not this like, I'm not going to come back later and go, oh, well, if you really want the information, you got to buy this other thing that costs 10 times as much. It's just not how I roll. It's also not for you if you're the kind of person that wants to go super, super slow and get a delayed return. There are a lot of people who, in the interest of, I don't know, reducing risk or being careful, like to plod along very slowly. And if you look at their returns they get on their actual deals versus the amount of hours they sunk into it up front, it just doesn't make any sense, right? If you're going to go insanely slow, you may as well take those hours and like go work at McDonald's. You'll probably make twice as much if that's what you're going to do. So what you can expect here is I'm going to share the five-phase process that I developed to turn someone from a real estate investor, or maybe even not a real estate investor, into a note investor in 30 days. And what I mean by a note investor is someone who can go out, source, find, filter, price, uh, do due diligence, and close on a note within 30 days. And of course, that brings you to phase two. And then there's the other 5 phases where it talks about scaling. And you don't need to spend tens of thousands of dollars to do this. And it's not the equivalent of getting, a bachelor's degree or something like that. But I will show you how you can start buying notes and actually get, not just buy notes, but get a business up and running. And then I'll share some of the detailed systems and processes that I put together to enable my portfolio to scale. So as we go through this, I want you to, if you can, try to remove distractions, close extra tabs and kind of pay attention, and be sure to take notes and ask questions. And I am going to have something at the end for you if you stick around. So tell me if, some of these things sound like you, right? So, maybe you've wanted to become a note investor, but, you don't have the time, you don't want it to take forever, you're not going to shuck out $20,000 plus. And maybe you want someone that's kind of experienced just to kind of show you what you need to do step by step to kind of follow the breadcrumbs. Or maybe you're coming at this from other aspects of real estate investing, and there's some issues there that you don't want to deal with anymore. Or maybe you're finding it more challenging to find deals in other areas of real estate investing. I know, for example, that REOs seem to be in quite short supply. So, and underlying real estate prices are going up. So if you're trying to do fix and flips or, other sorts of things, that can become more difficult to get deals. I know in a lot of areas, cap rates are coming down. Or if you, spend some time in the note domain, but you found it kind of overwhelming and kind of confusing and all over the place, then, this will be the right spot. So, the good news is I do help people with these all the time. And so this is a testimonial. I'll sprinkle some of these in. It's my friend Eric Sage. And so the Note Launchpad that I'm going to talk about has actually been in beta for about 3 months now. So I've got a lot of good feedback on that, made a lot of improvements to the process, to the course, and kind of refined it as it's gone. But Eric said, I can't believe the amount of detail and information he provided, right? So a lot of real estate training courses and other things tend to get too superficial. And then if you really want the details, they try to sell you something else. Everything I'm talking about in here has all those details. And something someone else said, I think this was Joey, it's not a 40,000 foot view of the note industry, but an in-depth, step-by-step, firsthand account of what it is and how you can be a successful part in it. So, so imagine, right, if you were able to do all this and you had the step-by-step process, you could actually go to becoming a note investor in 30 days, which would mean that you would be able to, price notes, whether they be performing or non-performing. And then you had all those systems and processes to know what to do once you bought them. So you can actually start not just buying notes, but build a business to scale, and then kind of have someone along with you to show you step by step how all of this can work. And so that absolutely can be a reality, and I can give you a little help to get there. But a little more, kind of about my backstory. So, as it stands today, I've built a note business over the last few years that provides a full-time income, and I get to work with a lot of cool people along the way. But on the road, to getting there wasn't always straightforward. And I wasn't always in this position, right? So I was working as a product manager, and had been doing all these other investments on my own. And, I came across notes, and I really wanted to learn how to not just be a note investor, but manage a decent size portfolio. And I got there eventually, but it took me longer than I would have liked. And I made a lot of mistakes along the way. And some of those were kind of painful, right? And, I explored some of the training options, and, some of them were either just kind of surface level or overpriced, or, overpriced, and we're still missing a lot of things. And then even once I started buying, I definitely got overwhelmed. It was interesting. Once I got to about maybe 12 notes or so, I started, running into issues on a couple deals that I had like never even known that I should be looking out for. And then just all the upkeep with, keeping track of loan servicers and attorneys and everything else just became too much of a headache, and it got kind of stressful. I didn't join one of those expensive masterminds, and there were a lot of good aspects of it. I met some awesome people, as people I still work with, and it did help me get started. But the problem with it was, well, there was a lot of good basic information. There were a lot of the details and a lot of the systems that just weren't there, that I basically had to put together on my own. And that road was more painful than it needed to be. So, I mean, at the end of the day, well, there were definitely a lot of upsides to this. Um, the guru didn't quite deliver on what he had promised. So, I was kind of struggling to grow this portfolio, and, was running into various problems. I would lose deals sometimes because I'd be mispricing assets, either pricing too conservatively. I had one in particular that I priced too high, and, I had vendors dropping the ball and not always catching them right away. Like I had some issues that fell through the cracks I didn't catch until a couple months later, and that got a little pricey. I ran into weird things like crazy city code enforcement people who resembled folks more like the mafia than anything else. Definitely some challenging borrowers. You'll find as you get into this, there's a lot of variation in the kind of borrowers that you run into as well. And so, it got kind of stressful. It got challenging. And I kind of reached different points where I wasn't sure how I was going to put it all together. And I think other people have reached this as well, because other people I know who have gone down this path and, hit rough waters on a particular deal, or ran into something and then just kind of, just kind of made them sick, and they're kind of like, gag, I'm out of here. But fortunately I plowed through and was able to get some of those pieces put together eventually. So, it definitely took time, but I kind of learned those mistakes, started putting the systems together, started to get to know business, figured out. And then my big thing was really documenting the systems and processes and documenting the lessons learned. Some of this came from my, kind of upbringing in the aerospace industry, where that's just sort of what you do, right? Because you're dealing with these big complex systems, and, one little thing that falls through the cracks can cause a serious problem. So having really good systems is a big deal. Or when something goes wrong, going back and learning that lesson so that it doesn't repeat becomes a very big deal as well. And so I went from this kind of like stressed out, scatterbrained guy with this sort of small portfolio to really getting things under better control, and then scaling out to a much larger portfolio. And then when you get to that point, that's where it started really cash flowing the way that I wanted. But it took some doing to get there. So, today I've got that scalable business, and, enjoy teaching other people about how I do it and avoiding some of the mistakes that I made. So that's a lot about my story. So now I'm going to kind of talk about some of the myths and some of the truths of note investing, because there are definitely a lot of myths out there. So kind of mistake number one that a lot of people make is they think that if you're going to learn notes, you got to go and spend boatloads of dollars on training from some guru, and that's not really the case. So, the good news is there are a lot of options out there for learning notes that you don't have to break the bank, that they can actually pay for themselves as long as you do one deal. And with Note Launchpad that I'm going to talk about coming up, you'll be able to get up and running a lot faster and with more confidence than options that are not just 10x the price, but like 20 to 30x the price. The second mistake I think people make is assuming that it's going to take a long time before they can start buying notes. Like people talk about becoming a note investor, note buying, like that's the end of the process, but really it's almost like the beginning of the process. And without a doubt, you have to do your homework. You have to know what you're doing. There are definitely a lot of disreputable people with bad notes for sale with various flaws that you're going to need to learn how to catch. But that doesn't mean that you need to spend, 6 months, 12 months, going in circles, going back and forth, being, cautious or whatever. If you know what you're doing and you know the steps and you can follow them and you have someone ask questions along the way, then you can absolutely get to buying within 30 days. And so, what you kind of want to focus on, right, when you think about being efficient and getting active in this, it's not just collecting information, it's learning the things that you need to know in the right order and then taking action on them. So when you have a step-by-step system, you can do that. The other mistake is that thinking that, pricing notes is one area where people make a lot of mistakes. They either think it's like one size fits all. They have these really oversimplified rules, like I pay X percent of UPB for performing notes and Y percent of UPB for non-performing, or I'm going to do some stair step thing, and that kind of oversimplifies it and doesn't take into account some important factors. What a lot of people do, especially like engineers like me, is they tend to over rotate the other way. They make it extraordinarily complicated. They make these elaborate ROI calculators that are just way more intense than they ever need to be. So, the right answer to this is going to be somewhere in the middle. And coming up, I'll talk about the nimble note pricing method. And so that'll give you the information you need so you can price things out very quickly while preventing mistakes. Because one of the things you'll find as you get in this is most of your offers don't get accepted. I think I've kind of stopped keeping track lately, but I believe less than 20% of the offers I put out get accepted, right? So if you're spending way too much time doing pricing and filtering, then you're wasting that time like 80% of the time. The other thing people make, and this is kind of in my opinion, a rookie investor mistake, is they want to try to buy the deals that just have the highest ROI. Or they go, okay, I'm a really good investor, so I only buy performing notes that have like a 20% yield to maturity. And that might seem backwards to some folks because as an investor, like, aren't you trying to get the highest return? And the answer is yes, you definitely are. But what happens, right, is even though notes are a great business, there's no free lunch out there, right? And a lot of times risk and reward are correlated. So what happens is if you go through and say, I'm only going to buy the notes that people will sell me at a super high ROI, that means you're going to buy the riskiest, sketchiest assets out there. And that's kind of referred to as getting drunk on yields. So you don't want to do that. When I target an ROI, when I bid notes, it varies from asset to asset. So if it's a less risky asset, I'm willing to accept a lower return. If it's a really risky asset, that could be okay. I just need a much higher return. So mileage varies, and you need to learn how to do that in a way that's just kind of straightforward and simple so you don't get lost in the weeds. The other one, and this is really prevalent now, is kind of assuming that the opportunity to buy notes is gone. We're 10 years past the financial crisis. The inventory is too low. All the price is too high. And you kind of miss the opportunity and it's all gone. And, the market is not the same now as it was, say, 5 years ago. I mean, it's true that pricing has gone up over the last few years, but I mean, the reality is any market, whether you're talking about mortgage notes or real estate or other things, right? They go through cycles and they have ebbs and flows. And the thing is, if you know where to look and you have the good processes for finding them, you'll be able to find plenty of notes. I mean, now I can't remember the number, but I think what is there, over like $1 trillion of seller finance notes being created, and the overall mortgage market is just so massive. I mean, if you think about the size of a portfolio that you need to make this be a business, you don't have to pick up that many. And I think it's a mistake to get too anchored on things just because maybe things were better in the past. Like, to put this into real estate terms, right? Like, I bet you went back in time 20, 30 years in California, You look at the prices, people would probably say, oh my God, 10 years ago, they were so much less. We missed the window. It's all over. But then you look at what prices have done since then, right? So, and, with the pandemic and some of the other things and the forbearances that are going to run out at some point in time, the market will see the next wave of mortgage notes hit the market. And so you want to be ready when those show up. Now, I don't know if that's going to be like 6 months or 6 years. I mean, who knows? You can't predict timing. But you can bet your ass that there are going to be plenty of opportunities and notes coming down the line. So that's kind of what not to do. Now I want to talk about what you should actually do and introduce you to the Note Launchpad framework. So step one, or phase one, is the part where we learn the foundation. So this is what sometimes is the only thing contained in other courses, where it's kind of the nuts and bolts of what note investing is, how it works, some of the paperwork, how notes work, things you can do to make money, all of those basic kind of things that are very foundational. And then in step two is where we actually go out and start buying notes. And, a lot of people, I think of this as like the end phase, but it's actually just the beginning, right? Because after you buy a note, you got to do something with it, so that's just the start. So in phase two, I talk about things like where to find notes, when you get notes, how to put together your business model, how to filter a tape to find the assets that fit your model that you might want to bid on, how to scrub them a little further to make sure you're identifying the quality assets, how to get them priced, how to present offers, how to negotiate, and then when you get offers accepted, how to do that final stage due diligence. And then I also talk about how note deals actually work as far as closing them and the different ways that they work, kind of the way that note deals have been closed traditionally and are mostly closed, and the way that PaperStack does it, and really that whole life cycle of a deal. And then once you actually get a hold of a note, you got to work your portfolio, and I call it adding value to your assets. So some of this is kind of the day-to-day management. Some of this is, if you're buying non-performers, how to rehab the borrower and flip non-performers into performers, which can get very lucrative when you do that. In my portfolio over the last couple of years, if I buy by a certain model, I can turn a non-performer into a performer about 2/3 of the time. That's if I buy in a certain way, right? If you buy a note where the property's been vacant for 10 years, that's not going to happen. But if you do it right, it can work out very well. And then in step four is where I talk about the systems and processes to allow you to scale. So like standard operating procedures, working with assistants, those sorts of things. And then in phase five is where I talk about funding your growth. So if you want to build a larger portfolio, unless you just happen to have a large net worth and you can put, a certain chunk of it into notes, at some point, if you want to grow, more than what you're able to, you'll need to take on outside funding. So I talk about how to do that in the right way. So in the Learn the Foundations, I kick it off with what I call the money mindset. So I think you'll find that in investing in general, not just in notes, I related a lot to sports. Or if you look at, like I'm a big golfer. So if you look at some of the best golfers in the world on the PGA Tour from a physical standpoint, from the standpoint of their skill sets, it's hard to tell them apart, right? But kind of the way they use their minds, the way they approach their games, what tends to differentiate them. And then I get into the actual note foundations, where I talk about some of the nuts and bolts. I talk about how to set up your business, whether that might be an LLC if you're buying notes after tax, or setting up an IRA. And then I talk about marketing made easy. Marketing is a subject that scares a lot of people, but if you really want to build a more scalable business, you need to be able to do that. And I show you how to do that in a way that's like very straightforward and easy, and tee you up. And, it's going to be pretty easy to execute on. And so then we get to the part where we start buying notes, right? So step one, we got to find people who are selling notes. And I just provide a list of a lot of the folks I use. Now, some of those are, places you may have already found, some of them may be places you haven't found. and then also show you how to prospect for other sellers. Then once we start getting tapes, we need to figure out how to filter them to see which assets meet our business model and that we can make offers on, how to do your pricing, submitting your offers, your due diligence, and then actually closing things out, right? So like I said, a lot of people think of this as like the end of the game. In reality, this is just getting warmed up, right? So another, testimonial here from the beta program that I've been running over the last few months. So it says, Dan put together a great step-by-step, easy to follow manual for note investing. His engineering background shines in the organization of the course. His teaching style is straight and to the point, explains the ups and downs, brings up the big earning potential, but also cautions about the downfalls, which sometimes get forgotten. And course includes a variety of spreadsheets which save you time in the evaluation of notes. That's the other thing I've done in this course is like when I did the mastermind that I mentioned, it said, here's a bunch of information. Now go build all your own spreadsheets and go figure it out. And that was super time consuming. So in Note Launchpad, it actually has pricing calculator for performing notes, pricing calculator for non-performing, a lot of checklists, a lot of other things. You can just download these things and use them. Now you obviously can and probably will modify them to fit your needs, but don't go through this whole nonsense of, hey, pay me $15,000 to learn this and then go figure everything out on your own. So in step 3, this is where we start actually operating the business. And some of this is you're going to have to put together your model. So one of the things you got to ask yourself is your goal, are you doing notes as a property acquisition strategy? Are you doing it as a strategy to buy non-performers and turn them into performers? Do you just want to hold on to performing notes? So there are a million different strategies, and I talk about some of the strategies, where they might fit, and then how to map those strategies to a set of filters that you can use. And then talk about other things like how to deal with vendors. It's sad news, but unfortunately, it's not so simple as hiring a loan servicer, hiring some attorneys, hiring some other vendors, and then having them do all the work for you. In theory, that's supposed to happen. In reality, things fall through the cracks all the time. So especially as you get into a larger size portfolio, being able to have those kind of alarms in place to notice when things fall through the cracks and follow up is really key. Talk about how to do loss mitigation, negotiate forbearance, trial payment, loan modification agreements with borrowers, how to deal with REOs, which is like the bane of my existence. I hate those things. Some of you who have other real estate investing backgrounds, that might be the easy part for you. For me personally, I find it a challenge. But I talk about some of the things that I've learned and what you can do. And so now, once we can, understand notes, we're buying notes, we're operating them efficiently, now we want to start to build the systems to scale, right? So, if you're just buying a couple notes, you can kind of keep things in your head, not too bad. You start going larger than that, especially start getting into like the 20, 30, 50, 100 range, you're definitely going to need systems. So one of the things I talk about is how to use a CRM or a customer relationship manager and actually go through details and give you all the information on the things that I track in my CRM for each deal and how I use it. Now, I personally use Pipedrive as the tool, but it really doesn't matter what tool you use. So some people use Podio, some people might use other stuff. But what I'm giving you is the information that I track in my CRM so you know what to do, and then you can take that and apply that to your tool of choice. And maybe you've got one that you already use for your business. I talk about how to work with assistants, actually give you a copy of a job ad that I've used successfully a few times and some of the different kinds of assistants you can use. And then really some of the meat and potatoes that like people have been asking me for and I've not shared, except for like one situation, and that was a close friend, but are the standard operating procedures that I built. So this is kind of like the operating manual. So I talk about things, how to handle loss mitigation, which means working with borrowers, tracking deals, tracking your forbearance agreements once you get a lot of these in place, and then managing your REOs and a bunch of other odds and ends as well. So, and then we get to funding, right? So if once you can do all that, unless you just happen to have boatloads of funds laying around and you want to use it all on notes, you're probably going to need some outside funding. One of the things that I really love about notes is that note deals tend to be rinse and repeat. Once you build a process, you can apply it again, apply it again, apply it again, and it can scale. But you're going to need outside money at some point if you want to do that. And this section is really super blunt in the course because I have a lot of warnings and I've seen like way too many horror stories, not just in the note business, but in real estate as well. So whether you're going to get outside funding, or the other thing I talk about is how if you're going to fund someone else, how to screen operators, how to deal with investors, and how not just to find funding, but find the right side of funding as well. So, oops. Yeah. And so there's a lot you need to understand to do this right. One of the things I was paranoid about, I almost didn't put this section in there because I really worry about, having some knucklehead get a hold of this and giving them, the right tools to go out there and do evil. That's why it's, kind of a blunt phase. But, obviously you need to understand SEC rules. There's a lot of laws involved when you go out and get funding. And I'm not an attorney and there's no legal advice contained within the course, but, you do need to understand the basics of those rules and where to get help with those. But I talk about how to screen partners, how to screen principals, and really what to do to be a reliable, dependable operator. And so I also go into detail on the different ways you can take funding. So there are kind of 3 ways that I've done it. 2 of these are sort of the same. So partials are a popular one. One of the ones I've been doing increasingly is loan hypothecations. I think of loan hypothecations basically the same as partials. At the end of the day, they're technically different. Whereas with a partial, you're selling basically a part of a loan. A loan hypothecation just means you're taking a loan from an investor, but instead of having a piece of property as the collateral, you're using a note as collateral. And then joint ventures, which have been very popular for a long time. And one of the things that I found fascinating as I went through this journey, which was one of the pleasant surprises, is finding funding is probably the easiest part of my business. For the last 2.5 years, I think I've had a line of investors at all times, waiting for me to find the right deal. The challenge you'll find is finding the right deals at the right price. That's the harder part. But actually getting the funding is not that hard in and of itself. However, you have to really, you have to do it right? In terms of not just knowing what you're doing and being a good operator, but it also comes down to screening your funding and finding the right partners. I've heard a lot of nightmare stories from folks who do basically what I do, or they've had issues with their JV partners. I mean, knock on wood, I haven't really had those problems, but I'll also show you how to screen and find the right people who not just have money, but are, more savvy investors, understand that, not everything's going to go perfect all the time, and are going to be good partners to work with over the long term. So, if you're interested in investing in mortgage notes and, you're one of those folks who's maybe like read some books and it's kind of like sparked your interest, or you spend a lot of time on YouTube and Facebook, maybe that's how you found this. I don't know. Or, this is also good if you've already gone through the point of you built some systems and you've bought some notes, but you want to scale and you're not quite sure how to do that. You want to be a note investor, but you don't have forever to dork around with it, and you don't have $80,000 to spend, and you want someone to show you what to do, and you're kind of getting sick of going on these rabbit holes and going down different areas and getting in circles and getting kind of overwhelmed and confused. Then this will help you get going within 30 days. So kind of imagine, right, if you could make this transformation to be an active note investor in 30 days, what would that do for you, right? So you'd be able to get a hold of tapes, you'd be able to price fast, put your systems in place, and then have someone to give you help along the way. And, those possibilities can absolutely become realities for you, no question. So, at this point, there's kind of two options if you're one of those folks. So you can, continue to spend kind of time and energy figuring things out and kind of going in circles, or just get the step-by-step answer for how to do it so you can start actually getting access to more deals and actually getting them done and moving a lot faster. So inside Note Launchpad, you'll get everything you need to start buying notes within 30 days. And not only that, but you'll be able to start building not just a business, but one that's scalable. So, we're going to talk a little bit more about the way that this works. So in phase one, in the learn the foundations, like I mentioned a little earlier, I'll start with the money mindset, which really doesn't even involve notes specifically, but I think it's one of the most important probably modules in the course, in my personal opinion. And then we'll get into the Note Foundations program. And after you've gone through Note Foundations, you'll have a pretty solid understanding of what it is to be a note investor. And even the foundations part isn't this like super high level overview, but it's really just kind of the meat and potatoes of what you need. And then we'll get into, setting up your business and then learning how to do your marketing. And so by the time you're through phase one, you're actually going to be way ahead where most people are if they're doing these like overpriced couple day seminars or some of the mastermind groups that are out there. And then in phase two, you won't become one of those people. Like, it's funny, in the mastermind I was in, there were a lot of folks who spent $15,000 and, traveled to events and did all this stuff and then never actually bought a note. So I won't let you become one of those people. So by the end of phase two, you'll actually be, if you follow the plan, you'll be making offers on notes. And there's actually enough time in there, if things go well, get some of those accepted, you'll actually be able to start closing on notes. And so I'll give you, the list of sellers that I use. I'll teach you how to comb through county records and find sellers on their own and how to reach out to potential sellers. And then once you've got that inventory, use what I call the fast filtering method to do a quick screen to figure out which assets that you can make offers on. And then we'll go through how to negotiate, and then into the nimble note, do the nimble note pricing, do your negotiation, complete your due diligence, and actually get through the close of the deal. So by the time you get to this phase, you should be blazing ahead of where most of the other folks are. And then phase three is really what starts getting into some of the, more of my kind of secret sauce, right? So if you think about it, right, just buying the note right is obviously where a big chunk of your profit comes from. Maybe most, but there's a big difference between note investors who operate a portfolio well and efficiently versus ones that just kind of let their assets straggle along. So in the loss mitigation magic section, I'll talk about how to turn non-performers into performers. Like I said, which for me works about 2/3 of the time if I follow my plan. And then you learn what you need to do on a day-to-day basis for your portfolio. So I have a lot of information that talks about things I like to do on a weekly basis, on a monthly basis, on a quarterly basis, and kind of gives you all those systems so you can manage this thing and you won't let things fall through the cracks. So by the time you get to phase three, you're not just somebody who's a note buyer and active note investor, you'll be a competent note operator, which is a different animal. And then in phase four, now is where we actually scale, right? And kind of put gas on the fire. And so there are other systems and processes here. And so this is where I get into, a lot of the detailed checklists, things you're going to need to scale, how to use a CRM, how to set it up. I just gave you all of my standard operating procedures. And I see I have a typo there that I've created, and also how to work with an assistant, right? Like, you're not just going to hire an assistant and have them solve all your problems. You have to solve the right assistant. And then when you have those systems and processes, it makes it really easy to onboard an assistant and get them up to speed. Or if you have a great assistant and then, whatever, they move on to the next thing and you got to start over, you can get that next person up to speed. You're not always starting from scratch. So, and then in phase 5 is where, we add the funding, and this is where you can really, add some rocket fuel to your business. So the creative financing toolkit's going to have all those creative financing methods. So I don't just talk about how to do partials or hypothecated loans or JVs. I actually give you spreadsheets that you can use and templates to help put these deals together. All right, so what comes with it? There's the Note Ninjas membership. So this is the private Facebook group. And so this is where, if you have questions, maybe you're working on a deal, there's something you're not sure about. I check this every day. And so that's where, you can get your questions answered, get other feedback. I may occasionally add additional members only content into the Facebook group. I did that with the systematic due diligence course. And then the Note Foundations program. So this is all the, the basic building blocks part of it. That's where we're learning the fundamentals, setting up your business. And, this is essentially kind of notes for newbies, or like, you could consider this Note Investing 101. And then the marketing part is really just a step-by-step guide on how to market your business. So it talks about things like how to send an email, how to set it up, what to say, how to run your list, how to set up a website, what you go into it, where places you can go to just pay someone a couple $100 to get it set up for you. So you're not going to get stuck on the marketing piece. You can just very quickly and efficiently get to it. And then in the Find Note Sellers Now section, I just give you my list. I'll tell you what, the number one question that I get asked is, where can I go buy notes? So a couple years ago, I made a video on where to buy notes, and I think I got like 11,000 views. I mean, it was like 20x the views of any other video I made. So this is, probably worth the price of admission in and of itself. And then the fast filtering method. So that's where we're going to put together your business model based on what you're trying to do, whether you're trying to do performing notes or non-performing as a property acquisition model, or non-performing as trying to rehab the borrower. And you can get through the fast filters quickly. And then Noble Note pricing contains calculators for both pricing performing notes and non-performing. And it's not just the calculators, there's also all the theory behind it. So you understand not just, what you don't want to do is just plug numbers into a spreadsheet. You want to understand what all the pieces, parts are, and why all of those things are in there. And then the loss mitigation magic, which is really, I consider part of my secret sauce. That's where you learn how to work with borrowers and convert those non-performers into performers. Sometimes loan servicers can do this for you. If you try that, I've often been disappointed when I've tried it quite exactly that way. And then the systems and processes savvy is where you get all of the standard operating procedures, checklists, everything that you need. And then the creative financing toolkit will show you how to set up partials, JVs, and all of those other deals to take on outside funding. The funding formulas is where you're going to learn not just how to raise capital, but how to do it the right way and get the right kind of capital. Because if you've kind of noticed the last few years, it seems like there is a lot of cash laying around on the sidelines. So just someone that, has money is not, in and of itself that rare of a thing. So you want to get the right partners to work with. So if you add all that up, and I think I'm being conservative with the values, it'd be $12,500, but that's not what this is overall. But I think it's worth, a minimum of that, and probably, very much more. And, to thank all the folks who are watching tonight, and I'm really kind of blown away by how many people are here. But if you sign up for this in the next 24 hours, then there'll be a bonus that you get. And I call it behind the scenes of a note business. This was a video I put together where I talk about kind of some of the things I do on a day-to-day basis, some of the things that I run into. And then I went through a handful of case studies. And some of these are case studies that I haven't talked about publicly. Some of them are actually still in process. So I don't even know the final answer. So I really wanted to give kind of a behind the scenes look of some information that I don't share anywhere else. So that's just a thank you for folks who sign up right away. So, what are some of the alternatives to learning notes this way? You could do private coaching. There's some folks who do that. I've actually done a little bit of this on kind of a consulting basis. And if I was going to work one-on-one with folks, it would get very expensive very fast. And so what you would end up with if you went down this road is you would be spending a lot more money, and it would not be as step by step and probably not nearly as complete. You could do a $15,000 mastermind like I did. That could be okay. And like I said, when I did that, I definitely learned a lot, but it was missing a lot as well. And I had to build all of my templates, build all of my processes, build all of my calculators. There were a lot of things missing. And there are masterminds out there that are a lot more expensive than this one as well. You could go to a school to learn notes that could cost from what I haven't done this, but I've heard it's like 20 to 80K. And oftentimes, you take one piece of training and then get upsold to the next one and upsold to the next one. You could do that. Or you could, work with me and have me do it all for you, and that's great. However, if you can learn to do this on your own, there's a lot of value in this, right? If you don't need me. So, what does that actually cost? It's not $15,000, and you can actually get started today for $150. So the way that Note Launchpad is set up, so there are two options. You can either do the 12 monthly payments of $150 each, or if you wanted to do the full pay, you get a discount, and it's $14.97. And so I wanted to set this up so that if you do this and you buy even one note, it'll pay for itself on the first deal, right? So if you're spending, $15,000, $20,000, if you think about it, you got to deploy a lot of money in notes to have that pay for itself. So I didn't want to do that. The other thing I considered was breaking these 5 phases into separate courses, because there are probably some people who just want to learn the foundations. There are probably some people who can buy notes, but they're like, I want to learn how to scale. Or there's some people who are like, okay, I can scale a little bit. I want to learn how to get funding. So rather than, break all those up and charge separately for all of those, I just priced it so that even if you really only care about one of the modules, it becomes worthwhile. So that was kind of the theory behind this. And I see Rob sent me a note. Yeah, Rob, I will get with you tomorrow. So how to get started. So you can go to notelaunchpad.com and join. And then if you join, you'll get an email that have a link to the private Facebook group and some other information, and then you can get started. And so if you do sign up for this tonight, or really within the next 24 hours by the end of the day, tomorrow you'll also get the behind the scenes of a notes business. But the behind the scenes of the notes business is just for the people who tuned in to the webinar and bought within the next day. So, think about where it could be like 1 month from now. You could get all the way there. And then just kind of one last testimonial from Derek. So it says in Note Investing, Dan is one of the good guys. His ethics, background, investing approach, and experience stand to benefit new and experienced note investors alike. I personally invested with Dan, and field knowledge providing is extremely high value. So Derek was one of the folks who went through the beta program. So, I think we finally got something in the industry that allow you to start buying notes within 30 days. I think that's really been missing and has been long overdue. So I am gonna kind of wrap it up there and see if any of the questions came in. So there were some comments too. So one person asked, I don't have a finance background. Will I be able to handle this? Yes, I mean, a finance background is definitely helpful. There's no question about that, but I explain the theory of how these work and then give you the spreadsheet. So it's designed so that you don't need a finance background to do that. And someone else asked, what happens if I don't like the course? And there's actually, I guess I kind of skipped that slide, but there is a, so I kind of ran out of time, so I skipped some stuff. There's a 30-day money back guarantee. And I've had this on my other courses as well. So if you sign up for this and you're like, oh, Dan lied to me, none of this stuff is in here, or I think it really sucks, just let me know and you can have a full refund. It's not a problem. And I've had the same guarantee on my other courses, and I've only ever had one person take me up on it. And the reason they took me up on it was they bought the course and then said, I don't have time to do this. And they never actually like even logged in to the course. So it wasn't that they didn't like it, but you don't have to worry about that. Just like the investors I work with, everybody I work with, I kind of want them to be all in and, feel like they're getting value. And so someone else asked, like, will I receive all the calculators and checklists? Yes. So you just get all of that stuff. I don't just tell you how to build them. Like I actually give them to you. If you want to modify them or do other things, you can absolutely do that. So that's it. So I'm going to wrap it up there. I'll make a replay available later, but thanks so much for joining. Like I said, I was kind of blown away by how many people stayed in there and just signed up in general. That was really great. Somebody asked you one more question, like how realistic is it for the beginning investor to participate if you don't have a lot of capital? Well, I mean, you would want to have money to buy notes on your own. A lot of the notes that I buy, mileage varies, but they can be 20 to 30K. And you also want to make sure that's not too big a percentage of your net worth. So I would want to have at least, 50K or so, ready to go. And then as far as the time commitment to get started, I mean, when you get the course, you have lifetime access. So you can go through it. If you're going through it, you're going to get there in 30 days. You're probably going to be spending a couple hours a day during that month. But there's nothing that stops you from going at a slower pace. And then there was another question about what type of notes. And actually, that's funny. I can't believe I left this out. Whether it's first or second. So this is I only cover first, but it's both performing and non-performing. And so I do talk a little bit about seller finance in there as well. So I'll let everyone go and wrap it up there. Again, thanks so much for joining. I really appreciate it.